part of the Earglue Media family of podcasts.
You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 312, Reylo. Now, we have never done a true formal Reylo show. I think it's come up in conversations, and whether indirectly or directly through other topics that we've covered. I think we did something back in The Force Awakens. We certainly talked about it quite a bit in The Last Jedi, but we've never done anything proper. And it's been a long time coming. I think it was probably our due diligence to at least talk about it. And I thought for this show that we would make sure that Mike didn't show up. So he's not here with me. But who is here with me is someone that was with us back on episode 303. That's the Media Blitz and Mando 2 show that we did. We really came up with grasping at straws for that title. But returning back to the show once again is our friend Makayla. Makayla, welcome back to the Cantina Cast and welcome back to talk about Reylo.
Yeah, thanks. I can't wait.
It was so this is one of those topics that when we were talking about what can we get you back on and what can we talk about, this kind of bubbled up to the top of the list for you. So I'm curious to see. Well, we'll get into that in a minute. We're going to talk all about where we are with our Reyloism and our fandom. But let's get to some news. We've got the Mandalorian news. So season 2 is set to drop in October of this year, which is, I think we kind of predicted that. We had spoken about October, felt right, just given the timing and based on where season 1 kind of took off.
Yeah.
And one interesting note about that was that Iger pretty much confirms that there will be more seasons of the Mando even after the second season, which is not too big of a shocker given how well it's done. And then even threw this little thing in there about the possibility of taking these characters from the Mandalorian in, quote, their own direction. So, Makayla, I know you guys are watching the Mando, yeah? Yeah. So any thoughts, any speculation just early on, and I'll put you on the spot here, but any thoughts about what characters he could possibly be talking about? Do you think it's any characters that have already been established? Or do you think these are characters that maybe are yet to come in season 2 that may eventually have their own spin-off shows?
You know, I feel like in the first season, they've added so many meaty characters that can have such a big backstory. Like one person in particular that I thought, just hearing about this right off the top of my mind, was Omera, which was the mother character.
Yep.
In the village episode, she kind of has her backstory already where she's good at shooting and she's kind of got this murky background. And I really feel like they would kind of go into that a little bit more. That's what I think of.
Yeah, I mean, she's one of those characters that we talked about her. I mean, we don't have to know why she was able to shoot so well, but she was such an interesting character that if they don't do a spinoff, then I would expect them to at least revisit that. I mean, I can't imagine he's not going to go back there in season 2.
He had such a connection with her, so close to as almost removing his mask. So,
right. Right. So what does that say about him or about her?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And as far, I guess for my take on this, I don't know if there's any characters that I felt like really, really needed their own spin-off series just yet. There might be, maybe I was going to say, maybe they do like a pre spin-off series of the 2 stormtroopers or the speeder bike scouts or whatever they are. That would be really cool. But no, I don't. I saw this as more of like, hey, we're going to be introducing new characters or returning characters, and some of those may get spinoffs more than the existing ones, because that was pretty tight. I mean, 8 episodes, and they, for the most part, with the exception of Mara, they pretty much wrapped up a lot of those characters and where they were.
They did,
going. So
I mean,
I don't know, maybe
except for the prisoner episode where you got this those characters that are just kind of off in the distance somewhere alive, So
yeah, no, it's a good point. those characters could come back, and maybe they do like a kind of like a Birds of Prey where they follow the bad guys around.
Yeah.
And maybe get to see what they're doing.
Yeah. You definitely get that vibe.
Yeah. And then it says the possibility of, and this is another quote from Bob Iger, the possibility of infusing The Mandalorian with more characters and taking those characters in their own direction in terms of the series. They say they want to take a hiatus in terms of theatrical releases. So this isn't anything new. We've heard this in not so many words. They've been kind of hinting around a little bit about it, beating around the bush about it. But it looks like they definitely are going to take a break, pump the brakes, if you will, from the movie releases and then kind of focus on TV. Good thing or bad thing?
I think it makes sense, really. If you just are like throwing up a whole bunch of content, you know, it's again, it comes to the quality over quantity type thing. Where I feel like as long as they're taking healthy breaks, I think it's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we always joke that there's no such thing as too much Star Wars. And I don't know that I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other if that's true or not. As long as the content's good, kind of what you're saying, right? If we keep just cranking this stuff out and it's not up to par and not up to expectations, then yeah, maybe it does make sense. I'm okay either way. I mean, I think we've got plenty of things still coming out. There's a lot of things to still talk about and speculate about. And so far, given The Mandalorian and how well it's done, they've proven that the TV can be just as good, or at least just as exciting in ways, right? Evoke those same kind of feelings that we got from the movies. So I'm totally cool with that if they want to make television the priority over the next few years. So we'll see. I guess we'll find out here. And we've got Cassian Andor still coming out. Maybe Kenobi. I'm not sure if that's
fingers crossed.
That thing's at. Yeah. We're getting rumors now of the sequel to Star Wars Rebels possibly coming out here soon, maybe this year, maybe next year. So all of that should bode well for us from a television perspective. Yeah. So one other thing too, and I think this is the last thing we have really to talk about, is this Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. So we had heard about this. No, I guess it was last year. We're at the beginning of 2020. So I can't remember. Was it 2019 or was it 2018 or somewhere along the lines? We did definitely hear that they were going to be coming out with a Star Cruiser or a cruise, if you will, kind of thing. And we knew it was going to be a couple days, couple nights. I think there was some early concept art, but we got this video that was released officially now, and it's called Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser is coming to Walt Disney World Resort. So the idea here is that you become this Star Wars hero. You get to go on your own adventure. You're doing 2 days, 2 nights in a hotel. They got this really cool thing where you get into a private cruise terminal, and then they take you to a launch pad. You blast off, and then you dock on this ship that they showed the concept art for, which is called the Alcyon. There you get to stay in these really cool bunk beds. They have the adults and kids get to wield lightsabers. I think you do some training with a training droid. And then all of this ties into some kind of adventure that's obviously, already scripted. And you're going to be able to leverage some of the lessons that you learn from lightsaber battles, and then maybe some of the things that you picked up as part of your exclusive tour of the bridge, and kind of give you your own little adventure. And then when all that's said and done, you get to go to Batuu. So right there at Galaxy's Edge. So this all sounds pretty exciting and pretty expensive, but is this something that you would want to, are you going to add this to your bucket list? Well, let me ask you this. Have you gone to Galaxy's Edge yet?
No, I haven't. I'm going in late June this year. Actually, I'm going to Disney.
Okay,
I'm going to
cool.
Disney World. I'm driving down there. So that's going to be fun.
All right.
But I'll tell you what, this is like my dream.
Yeah,
to be
it?
like immersed like that in something that I love so much. I feel like you can talk to anyone who really has a passion about like a fictional world, and to give them the option to spend multiple days just like 100% immersed. I swear, if people aren't like actually dressed up, like the actual goers, not the staff or, like
Right.
the people who are going, if they're not like dressed up, like, what are you doing here? Like,
Yeah. That would be cool if they like came in, if you got there, and it's kind of like when you go bowling and they give you a pair of bowling shoes that you can check out, right? If they have like a wardrobe and like, you can pick anything in here. This is your size. These are your sizes. And you get to kind of dress as you'd like. That's a great idea.
I think that'd be wild. I think that'd be just great.
Yeah.
And talks of like, I know on Discord, we've been talking like, oh, are they going to throw in like a free lightsaber build or, something like that? I think that'd just be great.
Yeah, that's I'm liking that more and more. I don't know. I still haven't done Galaxy's Edge. It's not in the budget nor the plans for this year. But at some point, I would like to get out there before I shuffle off this mortal coil. But this is another one too. And for me, it's all about I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's all about the immersion for me. All right, if this is just another resort and all that, then I don't know if that I'm that interested. I really want to feel like I'm displaced in somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what I'd asked Jonesy when he got back from Galaxy's Edge was, did you ever feel like at any moment you just kind of lost yourself in the environment? And if so, even if it was for just a few minor seconds or a minute, to me, that would feel worth it, right? Validation for the price and the time and all that. It says guests will be invited to participate in a variety of activities. Both adults and kids alike will get to wield a lightsaber and face off against a training remote. And I think there's a clip of that, or like a picture or some concept art of what that training remote looks like. It does look like a training droid, although it looks like it's mounted to the wall rather than
Well, we can't expect them to hover. Yeah.
Right.
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm sorry. I need to temper my expectations just a little bit. We're not there yet, Albert.
We're only in 2020.
I know. Well, maybe we'll put a link in the show notes. If you don't get it, if you haven't had a chance, you can go watch the video. It's kind of like a promo video, if you will, for almost like a travel agency, really. But that's out there on YouTube. So just look for Galactic Star Cruiser coming to Disney World Resort. So should be cool. All right. Well, let's get into our main show, and we are going to be talking about Reylo. So I thought we'd maybe first start off in what is Reylo, because I don't this isn't for anyone's edification. If you're listening to this podcast, you are pretty I would imagine you've got some kind of concept or idea of what Reylo is and just what it all means. But I more than anything, I think the question that I have that I want to kind of throw out there from at the beginning is, why does Reylo, or this particular trope, and there's a couple different tropes that this kind of falls into, but why do people get so fascinated with it? Because this isn't the first time. I mean, there were plenty of other, quote, Reylos and plenty of tropes that are very similar to this or take aspects of Reylo that we see in Star Wars. And, from going back in literature and other movies and everything else, this is not new. It's been out there before. But why is there such a fascination with all of this?
Well, I think it kind of goes to, for me personally, it's almost like you see a lot of women, especially getting into Reylo. Guys can kind of get into it, but I feel like women really get into it. And really, our nature is to nurture. And so when you see a character who's like in pain or is like suffering, we're just like, oh, I just wish we could take care of them. And when there's a character, especially if it's a male, right, you got like these tropes of like all girls want bad boys and I can change my beloved, right? It's not so much I think, oh, he's so like dark and brooding and sexy or something like that. It's more of like it's that nurture aspect. And when we see like a female lead, we see ourselves as like, well, if she can help him, stop suffering and such, I feel like that's where a lot of Reylo fans get really connected with the characters, because they want to see them happy. They want, their ship, which is what, their relationship, the ship. They want to see them be happy. And I think that's just kind of where that goes from there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, it's there's a lot to be said about the nurturing aspect, which I think is inherent in both males and females. Yeah. But I don't know that as males, and I'm using quotes here because just to be politically correct, I don't know that we are actively looking for those aspects in a Reylo kind of ship. At the end of the day, I think for me at least, with the whole Reylo thing is, I don't, and if you go back and listen, let me clarify something. If you go back and listen to the shows that we did leading up to The Last Jedi and then right after The Last Jedi, I was very much against the idea that these two should hook up. Yeah. I was in the camp at the time of, he's nothing, she's too good for him. There's, I don't like that. And for me, that was coming from, it's almost kind of like the opposite of what you said. For me, it was coming from as a father to a daughter, right? I wouldn't want my daughter hooking up with somebody like this, right? This is not the model citizen. This is not what I would want from her. And at the end of the day, I mean, come on, let's be real. I'm going to support whoever she ends up falling in love with. Should she fall in love with somebody, male or female? Yeah. But if, as a father, I just go into that protective mode and this is not what I want. You should stay away from this guy, that kind of thing. This is the shotgun that I'm coming to the door with, right? Or, intimidating the would-be boyfriend, if you will. So that's kind of where I was there. I think at one point I just kind of let that all go because I really just started to, I think that my interest in the characters rose above the personal aspects of the relationship. And I really didn't mind the fact that I just had to remind myself, this is not reality. Yeah. This is a fantasy. This is a movie. It's okay. This is kind of fun. Let's just go with it kind of thing. And I got there in a couple different ways, which we'll talk about in a second. But I guess the next question I would have is, so do you officially identify as a Reylo, or is this something that you are just, keeping up with and enjoy talking to people that have identified as Reylos?
Oh, I think I'm for sure in too deep.
In too deep?
Yeah,
is that what you said?
In too deep, yeah. I've actually made friends just like out of the blue by like, hey, do you know what Reylo is? And they're like, yeah. And then we just like start talking about it. So it's right. One of those things that can kind of bring people together, which is kind of funny. So yeah. I definitely say yes.
Yeah, I would, for me, it's so weird because I've never really called myself a Reylo. I've never ever uttered the words I am a Reylo or said that on social media in any way. But I will say this. I was going back ahead of the show. I went back to my Twitter account and I looked at the people that I follow, and they're almost like 90% of the people I follow are Reylos. And that was not by... that wasn't me purposely going out and tactically looking for people that said, we're Reylos or we're shipping this and saying, oh, follow. It just naturally occurred. So I've, even though I may never have identified myself as somebody who was a Reylo or a Reylo fan, I would have to say I'm one only because I share a lot of the same opinions and a lot of the same views. And I certainly follow a lot of those folks on social media. So yeah, I would say I definitely am a Reylo. Now that said, I think there are, and I want to be clear about this because there's a negative connotation that comes with it. Unfortunately, just much like there's a negative connotation sometimes when we talk about the original trilogy fans, right? Or we've got the there's just different sects, and this is not specific to Star Wars. You find this in every every fandom that's out there. There are people that take it to the extreme. Yeah. Right. That almost kind of, that the lines between reality and, fantasy start becoming blurred and things get ugly and things are being said things are taken out of context, emotions flare. And that's not what we're talking about. I mean, I would say by and large, for the most part, most of the people I follow are Reylos, and they just sincerely like those characters, and they are very much in tune with reality and aren't going into the fringe and that sort of thing and making, bad names for themselves. But unfortunately, there are those that are out there that do. Yeah. And this isn't to shun them because, Star Wars is Star Wars to you and it's personal, and I get that. But yeah, I mean, that has left kind of a bad taste in some people's mouths, much like the Fandom Menace folks did, or any other, kind of religious sect that's out there for Star Wars fandom that goes a little bit too extreme. Yeah. So when did you become a Reylo fan then? Was this something that occurred as part of The Force Awakens? Did you go into the movie already thinking that, I'm going to ship these guys because of, good guy, bad guy kind of thing? Because we didn't really know much about the characters, right?
I didn't really start shipping the whole Reylo thing until after The Last Jedi. So I would watch The Force Awakens and I liked it. I thought there was something there, but I saw it more of just this story is great. I can't wait to see where it goes. But after The Last Jedi came out, I started thinking wow, there's really something here. And then that's after The Last Jedi is when all of the, negativity started to come out about Reylo. And I was reading those comments. I'm like, well, but and I'm making arguments with myself. I'm not talking to anybody, but I'm like, well, you might say that, but, and just reading through that. And I'm thinking, I'm fighting way too hard for something for no one but myself. Like
Right, but
this.
yourself.
So I think that's when it started to happen for me, was after I went opening night for The Last Jedi. And that's when it happened. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. So and for me, same thing. Going into The Force Awakens, I had my own theories about Rey and this character being brother and sister.
Yeah.
And that they were, Luke and Leia's son and daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was kind of like probably the prominent theory at the time.
Yeah.
Or dominant theory at the time. And leaving that movie, I still felt the same way. I felt like, okay, they're connected, and maybe they're brother and sister, maybe they're cousin. I didn't get the romantic vibe though.
Yeah.
And that was probably intentional. I think J.J. Abrams kind of left it open, and that's kind of what spawned it all, right? Because they never clearly said, no, they're just strictly relatives, or it's strictly platonic, or, it is explicitly romantic, because they never really officially said, and it was pretty open-ended. That's where I felt like it started for some folks. So you could say whatever you wanted, and there was no one or nothing to prove you right or wrong.
Yep.
And I think it was when The Last Jedi came out that it kind of cauterized the idea that they were romantically involved into a whole nother level. I mean, we're going to get into this because we're going to talk about some of these specific instances in all three of the sequel movies where there was, probably something there, but we're going to find, as you'll see, and as you probably all know, in The Last Jedi, there are some very, very concrete things that happened, very materialistic things that happened, material things that happened, that really just reinforce this idea that they were something more than just, I don't know, relatives or closely bonded in some way.
Yeah.
So retrospectively now, looking back, is this something? And so ahead of this movie, or ahead of this show, I went back and watched The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. And I wanted to just kind of say, okay, now that I know where this thing ends up, this was the end game. This is where, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt that this is where they were going. But now that we know that's where this went, were there hints? Was there things that we didn't catch? Were there things that we didn't see? I mean, should we have seen this coming all along? Did you see this coming all along retrospectively now?
I feel like weird saying yes, because now I'm like vindicated that like it actually happened. But I do feel like, especially after The Last Jedi and even after watching The Force Awakens, I spoke about this briefly on episode 303, but just like there was something that just as like a moviegoer, after watching it, I was like, yeah, there's probably something there. Right. And then after The Last Jedi, I was like, yeah, there's definitely something there.
Right.
So I feel like I did, but. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, it was pretty much confirmed it took off. The whole Reylo idea was, again, it was there probably to a lesser extent before The Force Awakens came out. It was picked up some momentum after The Force Awakens came out. I'm sorry. Before The Force Awakens came out, there was a little bit of momentum. After the momentum picked up, and then with The Last Jedi, this is on a graph. It just skyrocketed, right? and of course, that's kind of what.
And of course, before the Rise of Skywalker came out, nobody really knew what was going to happen, but we all had hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and that's the bittersweet thing about all of this, and this is kind of what we talked about. Not to deviate too much here. But, with The Rise of Skywalker, it really felt like, and I think Jonesy was in agreement here, it really felt like Abrams and Terrio tried to go out and be all things to all people. And so everybody got little pieces of things that they wanted. Reylo's got the ship that they wanted, but they didn't get to see anything more than that because, well, Ben Solo died just, immediately after they finally kissed, right? So it feels like you got it, and then they kind of let you go. And I think that's obviously rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. They wanted more. I'm in that boat. Officially, I've been, out there campaigning that Ben Solo deserved better. Ben Solo deserves better.
Yeah.
I would like to see Ben Solo come back, right? I'm all there. And so I'm in that camp. But yeah, it did feel like it was kind of, they kind of just let all of that go. But one of the other things that was interesting is that just how much people hated this idea that they should not be together. And it became very personal. Like, And I'm not throwing shade on anybody that felt that way. Like you said, I really try to walk right down the middle of this on all sides.
That's safe.
But it is safe and it's not easy. And I don't know that I'm doing a great job of it, to be honest. I'm probably going to put my foot in my mouth here, but I cannot understand, and I don't want to try to understand, I guess is the more important thing. I'm not trying to understand how it becomes so personal and why it becomes so personal when at the end of the day, this is truly just a movie. And I'm not putting these movies in front of my kids and saying, here, watch this. This is a life lesson, right? So I don't know. Any thoughts around why this became so personal?
Well, it's a hard one to answer because, again, going back to like people just love to live in their fictional worlds, right? I know I have a lot of my life. I've loved to read and I love to get into stories and you really immerse yourself. And when you're immersing yourself in something like this and you have a bad guy, you don't always want the bad guy to succeed, right? And you can feel that way in life too. You don't want the bad guy to succeed. And when fiction really is your life, I think it can, like you said, rub people the wrong way. Yeah.
I don't know. It's been unfortunate, I guess, to see just how far people take this and how personal it gets and just how outspoken they get. And a lot of times what you hear, the people that are the loudest and the people that are the most emotionally charged are because there is something that resonates with them personally. That they don't want. And this strikes a chord, it strikes a chord in a very bad way. And so that manifests in their emotions and their feelings and being outspoken and being vehemently against the idea that a good guy or a good person should be with a bad person. And so I get all that. Like I said, I totally understand where it comes from, but it's at some point, I think at some point we've got to kind of draw that line, right?
Yeah.
We've got to feel like, all right, we got to let this go. It's just a movie at the end of the day. It's just a space opera. It's a, kids movie, if you will, if you want to go George Lucas way.
Like words like toxic and abusive were always tossed around with this subject. But again, it comes to, you have to be able to separate fiction from reality, like we've been saying. So it's just, it's one of those things.
Yeah. And, like I said, I made the comment about I'm not putting this movie in front of my kids. And,
exactly.
when we watch these movies, it's not like, I don't pause the movie and go, see what happened here, kids? This is what could happen.
This is why you don't trust,
Right. Yeah. No, this is not what I'm doing. Right.
Yeah.
That's a conversation. And in fact, if nothing else, it's me pausing the movie and going, hey, don't get caught up in this because this is not reality at all.
Yeah.
Right. If you guys want to talk about what relationships are like and all that, we will have that conversation. But guys, this is just a Star Wars movie. And I just want you to have fun watching it and root for the good guys, root for the bad guys, root for both. I don't care. But anyways, okay, so let's talk about some of the instances where we saw this and we can just kind of pick at them and kind of decompose them just a little bit. And some of this, now admittedly, some of this is us going back and I'm not going to say retconning because it kind of feels like we are, but there are things that, now you go back and you watch The Force Awakens and you're like, oh, okay, I can probably, tie the line there and connect the two. And sometimes it feels a little awkward because it's not really it's like when you're building a puzzle and you got that one piece and it kind of fits, but you're going to take it out because it doesn't really fit. But
you have to finish the puzzle.
But we have to finish the puzzle, and I'm so tired of it. I've been talking about this puzzle forever. So, in The Force Awakens, one of the early lines, I guess, where we get the idea that Kylo Ren is at least aware in some way, in some aspect, of Rey is the line of what girl. The girl I've heard so much about. And we almost get the sense that he's fascinated in some way with her. Any ideas about where he would, and for those of you that have been listening to the show, I think the guys did this way back in The Force Awakens after the movie came out. They talked about this, but for us, any thoughts around where now, after that we've seen all three of the sequel movies, where this idea that Kylo Ren may have already heard about her come from? Was it?
Well, you think about it, if again, like you said, if the puzzle pieces, we're really having to push it together here, but if it's something like sharing dreams or, Rey has the vision in The Force Awakens and sees Kylo, if it's something like that where he's kind of known of a girl or has been pulled towards a girl, like I said, whether in dreams or in like thoughts, and all of a sudden, it's brought up and he's like, what girl? And when he finally does meet her, he says, the girl I've heard so much about, yes, it could be just in frustration when he says, what girl?
Right.
But at the same time, you can kind of pick some things out of there that, like, what ifs for that aspect.
Yeah, that line of what girl, I can go either way with it. I can go the way of it's just simply him having a very visceral reaction.
Yeah.
Right, to what's going on, given what's happened in that moment, right? Like, what girl? Like, this is it. I can't even believe this is happening, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or you could go the route of it strikes a chord with him because there is a girl that's been on his mind for reasons unknown at that point.
Yeah.
I think if we dive into the reasons unknown at that point, it could be, now that we've seen the Snoke comic, and we've had 2 issues of that, we know that he's had a relationship with Snoke. For all we know, Snoke could be telling him that, hey, as now that you're, with me and you're the dark side of the Force and the epitome of the dark side of the Force, just like your grandfather was. I just want to let you know there is somebody out there.
Yeah.
Because Snoke knows, he was aware of this. Now we know that. But hey, there's somebody out there that is of the light, and she's really powerful. She's got just as much, if not more, potential to become the most powerful Force user ever, and way more than you. I mean, he could be using that to manipulate him, to kind of drive him to become more powerful than he is, and that kind of thing. So that's what the line refers to there of so much of I've heard so much about. It could have been coming from him. The idea of the dreams and that dream sequence, I think, was definitely one of the theories that had come out back then with the guys on the show. And I still subscribe to that. I think there's, we're going to talk about this too in a little bit, about an anime that's out right now, or that just came out not too long ago, I should say, where there's these 2 characters that are kind of sharing dreams in that regard. So yeah, maybe this is something that he's seen or heard about in his dreams, and vice versa, whether she admits it or suppresses that or whatever. But probably definitely that would kind of all lead to this fascination. Now, the interrogation scene is another one where I think this is the first time for me that I shouldn't say for me, it is true. I think it's the first time they actually connect, right?
Yeah.
It's a very different connection than something that comes later on in The Last Jedi, for example. But that whole interrogation is different between Poe and Rey. What were some of the things that stood out, I guess, when you look at both of those scenes there from a Reylo aspect?
Well, when you go from the difference between Poe, right, you see that sequence where he's in pain, he's yelling, he's been bloodied from being hit on his head. And you go to Rey, where she's unconscious, but she just looks so peaceful, right, in that first scene, and then she comes to, right? And it's one of those things where the stark contrast just between those 2 introductory scenes of the interrogation room, one for Poe and one for Rey. I think that it's symbolic, and then you look at how Kylo is. He's waiting for her to wake up. He's crouching on the floor. He's not beating her and waking her up and saying, like, where's the map?
Right.
And that's just like the first thing that comes to my head. But not only that, the point where when he's like digging into her mind, he's not going straight for the map. And I don't know if this is like like he's trying to threaten her by saying, look at what I can do. I can see all your memories. But he's like kind of getting distracted, He's like, oh, you're so alone. You're a scavenger, I can see the ocean or the island, so it's so different.
It is different. Yeah. And that's a good point. First off, I always thought that was kind of creepy.
Yeah.
That he's just crouching there, like watching her sleep and like, I don't know. It's
okay.
You hear stories about people like that. So those are the people you want to stay away from. Yep. But so that said, I'm sure there are people out there that look at that scene and go, oh, how sweet. Right. It's very sweet that he would sit there and just watch her sleep. And I don't know, maybe whatever. But and I'm not saying I'm not dissing it. Maybe there is. Maybe there's something in that. But I mean, you could make an argument that that's him being fascinated with her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't know how long he's been there, but I mean, yeah, if he's been sitting there watching her, staring at her, he's young, he's attracted to her right then, that moment. He's thinking about who is she? What is she? You know, we don't even know. He could have been trying to get into her mind while she was sleeping.
Yeah.
Maybe he was picking and pulling things out from there at that point too.
Mm-hmm. And another thing too, you know, he takes off his mask. Like, why? Was he supposed to look threatening? Because he doesn't really look threatening without his mask on. It kind of does the opposite effect. So why would he take off his mask to try to get that information out of her?
Yeah.
No.
Just as an aside, and I apologize for saying this in advance, but there was a character named Vinnie Barbarino from Welcome Back, Kotter, and I always see Kylo Ren in that scene, Ben Solo, as that character. So if for anybody that knows that reference, you're welcome, and you'll probably never look at that scene ever again the same way. Okay, so back to what we were talking about. So he's sitting there staring at her, and you're right, because he takes the mask off. He's almost disarming himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's taking that off. He's disarming himself. He's going more, you know, hey, we're both human. We're both young. Look at me kind of thing. I mean, his hair is like, you know, glorious in that scene.
It's like no hat hair. What is that? Yeah,
no, exactly. You'd think he'd have like helmet hair, and he doesn't. So good props to him and whatever product he uses. But yeah, so he not only does he disarm himself, but then he starts kind of disarming her.
Mm-hmm.
He starts talking about, like you said, her feelings. He's like, you're so lonely, right? He's appealing to her emotions and her feelings. He says, I feel it too. And that line itself was always interesting, of him saying he felt it too. You had the question of whether or not this was kind of hinting that there was a dyad already. And I think this is one of those things that I said earlier, where it feels like, yeah, we could probably draw a connection here and kind of make that line, connect the dots, if we will. But it feels a little forced, and maybe it is. But nonetheless, it does feel like in that moment, there's, whether he realizes it or not, I think he likely feels that there is some kind of an emotional charge between them. You know, he feels the same amount of pain, he feels the same amount of fear that she's probably going through. And they're probably at that same level. And that's maybe why he's saying, I feel it too. And so I think that's kind of like that first moment where whether they consciously know it or not, I think it's more of a subconscious level. They are connected, which, you know, comes out a little bit later down the road.
It's very vulnerable too. Like, this is so much in contrast than we've seen Kylo Ren up until that point throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
Going from him like slashing, you know, the walls on his Star Destroyer, you know, just being angry at everything. He's getting much more emotional and, just like I said, more vulnerable. That's true.
Yeah, he opens up here more than we would expect him to, right? I mean, there's really no reason for him to do that. All he didn't have to say a single word. All he had to do was go in and take whatever he wanted. And I think it was through the process of him talking to her and stoking her memories and doing all that he probably evoked that force power in her that allowed her to protect herself and kind of shut him out completely, which, you know, scared the crap out of him. All right. So there were a couple other scenes, but in the sake of an interest of time, we'll move on. The only other thing that comes to mind is at the very, very end, you know, when they're kind of locked in sabers and they're kind of
need
looking
a teacher.
At each other. What's that?
You need a teacher.
Yeah, you need a teacher, right? That whole scene there, I mean, that's, again, him appealing to her. And I think at that moment, especially, you know, you need a teacher. I do take him at his word. I think he's sincerely like, hey, man, you're great. You're really good at this stuff. And maybe he's attracted to her. But nonetheless, I can take you on, and, you know, you can be my pupil, and we'll rule the galaxy together at some point.
Yeah, he even goes to Snoke and is like, hey, like, she's a good Force user. Like, we should train her.
Yeah, right. Let's get her on our band.
Yeah, come on.
All right, let's move on to the big one. So this is, let's talk about The Last Jedi and Reylo here. And the first scene, and these aren't necessarily in order because I think I got them out of order here, but the first one I want to talk about is the "You're not alone, neither are you." This is a pretty big scene.
Yeah.
Because I think it really speaks to the loneliness that each of these characters is feeling. It's the first time that I feel like they truly connect, like on a metaphysical, you know, force-induced kind of cosmic way. You know, and this is the moment where, you know, they kind of extend. And so what I'm talking about is when they're in the hut.
Yeah.
On Ahch-To, And, she's got that little shawl around her arms, and there's the fire. And then next thing we have the hand sex scene that we've talked about many times in the show. And it's almost kind of like the inverse of what comes in a bit later, because it's her hand that goes up first.
Yeah.
Right? It's her hand almost reaching out to Ben. And I'll talk about that here in just 1 second. But it's her hand that reaches out to Ben and extends that kind of hand of peace, a hand of, come touch me kind of thing. And then later on, it's the quite the opposite when he's reaching out to her and saying, join me in the throne room. But I do want to talk about the touching of the hands, because I always saw this touching of the hands to be more, I always felt like it meant more than just the physical contact.
No, well, I'm sure.
I think we get, yeah. And right. But I think what I hear a lot, I'm right or wrong, what I hear a lot is, hand sex and the physical aspects of it. But I mean, all joking aside, I think that was really just more symbolic of what they were really feeling. Like, I really felt like in that moment, that symbolizes the connectedness of those two, mentally, spiritually, in the Force.
Yeah.
And, probably on an emotional level for the first time that neither one has experienced and probably has ever experienced in their lives. And I felt like it's also that first moment where she sees Ben Solo.
Yeah.
Because even up until that moment, her guard's always up, and we kind of skipped. We're going to come back to it, but we skipped over the Ben Solo scene, right? The shirtless scene. But I don't feel like in any of those scenes leading up to that she really finally or really touched or connected with Ben Solo.
Yeah.
And I think it's in this moment, in this scene, that she finally does. And this was a huge turning point, right? This was like that watershed moment for her in her character and her relationship with Ben Solo. So anyways, let me pause there. Let me get your thoughts on that scene. I'll shut up and listen.
Oh, you're good. I definitely agree. It's definitely more of just that mental connection between the two. Like, you're thinking of Rey, she's grown up alone. She felt like she had kind of like this father figure in Han, and Han gets killed. And, so she's so angry about that throughout the beginning part of this movie before this scene. And, when she finally does reach out, again, it comes to vulnerability. And that's a big aspect in relationships with friends or, the people you love. Like, it's being vulnerable is very important. And that whole scene of her lifting up her hand and him reaching back, like it's almost like a handshake where they're like agreeing, like, yep, we're close now. That's kind of how it's like. And just the whole idea how it's just like their middle fingers touch just very slightly, right? It's just the whole idea that it's like binding them almost, that Rey's not going to be able to forget that, oh, Ben Solo is still there. Like, he can come back. Like, I know he can. And then she spends the rest of the film believing in that, having the hope for that. And I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what Kylo's thinking, right? Because he sees the vision that she's going to turn evil, and but it's that same thing still. It's still that vulnerability together.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting too, because like I do feel like in that moment when she's talking to him and he's listening, I mean, he's not even saying anything.
Yeah.
Right? He's just truly listening to her speak. And it does feel like that is Ben Solo in that very small moment.
It does.
That's who that person is. Because it would be very easy for him to just, because she's vulnerable. I mean, she's completely exposed herself at this point, right? In terms of what she's giving up, the amount of detail she's given up about herself and internally reflecting on what's going on with her and how she's feeling and all this stuff. I mean, again, she doesn't have to do any of that, and yet she's doing it. And you would think somebody like Kylo Ren, as that persona, would immediately seize that moment to try to take advantage of somebody that was weak emotionally in that moment, right? And he doesn't. I mean, he's just quiet the entire time. He's literally just being a shoulder to cry on, somebody that sincerely cares. And I don't think a Kylo Ren is capable of doing that without uttering something to take advantage of that situation. But somebody like Ben Solo would. And so that's what I feel like that really is truly him when that's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's the biggest moment there is. I mean, in my opinion, in terms of Reylo, it was kind of. I remember watching that movie, and in that moment, in that scene for the first time, I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're done. We're done here." Right? I mean, this is it. Whether it goes any further or not, it doesn't make any difference anymore. And that's where I think a lot of this a lot of the polarizing opinions of The Last Jedi came from, at least from a Reylo perspective, really stem from this scene, because this was the one where after you saw it, there was no doubt, at least there should be no doubt in your mind, that there is something there.
Yeah.
Whether it goes one way or the other was insignificant at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think anybody that was a true Reylo fan or was hoping for something to happen was vindicated in this scene.
Yeah.
Okay, so so let's talk about Let the Past Die, Kill It If You Have to. And this was the shirtless, the Ben Swallow scene. And this one, I don't know. There's a lot here that happens, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I always felt like the shirtless part didn't have to be in there.
Yeah,
I don't really care
agree.
one or the other.
And I almost feel like, too, I don't think when, you get that whole thing where, Rey was so attracted to him, because she was taken aback. But I feel more like it was just a cultural thing. People wore clothes. And she was just surprised that he wasn't wearing a top.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, he feels awkward, too, because in that moment, what is it? I had the line here written down.
He says,
I'd rather not do this one. I'd rather just not right now. And he says, yeah, me too.
And then she turns around.
Yeah. Yeah. But he says, yeah, me too. Like, wow. Yeah, me too. This is not a good time.
This is awkward. Yeah. It's just working out.
This is awkward. Right. And I don't know. And I'm not taking it. If people want to believe that she was sexually attracted to him because he didn't have a shirt on, I mean, that's fine. All I'm saying is I don't know that, to me, where this relationship was going and where it was planning to go was well beyond the physical aspects of it. I mean, those are all great, but at the end of the day, these guys are on a connected level that we can't even comprehend because it's made up. And it involves the Force and all that. Yep. So, whatever. But the bigger part from this scene really is the very end, where I think, he starts retelling from his perspective, and maybe he embellishes just a little bit, but he tells the story of, hey, I was a victim here.
Yeah.
Right. I was just fine. Luke attacked me. I defended myself. That's what happened. You don't know the story. I think that's what planted that seed of doubt in her, which would eventually allow her to open up to him. Yeah. Like in the scene that we just talked about. So that was really the bigger thing here. And then obviously there was this whole moment where, this was kind of a subtle way of him saying that, hey, your past is your past and your future can and should be with me. Right. I mean, this is the whole line of let the past die, kill it if you have to. That's really what he was trying to do here. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what happened in the past, doesn't matter. Don't worry about your parents. Don't worry about Luke. Don't worry about Han. Think about right here, right now, you and I, and what we could do together moving forward. I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that scene before we move on here?
On that scene in particular, it just kind of goes to show that Kylo Ren is struggling internally, because at one point, he's being vulnerable with her, and at the other point, he's like, come rule the galaxy with me. It's that inner battle, I think, that's still happening. You see that Rey's, still having to fight for Ben Solo, not so much for Kylo Ren.
Yeah. And there's quite a few in The Last Jedi, but the next one is you come from nothing, you're nothing, but not to me. In this one was kind of a bit of a doozy as well, because, and I feel conflicted with this scene, because on one hand, there's he's saying a lot of the same things that you would expect somebody like a Ben Solo to say, but at the same time, and Rey sees that. I mean, it's all over Rey's face. It's like, come on, dude, really? When he says, come, join me, and he's asking her to take his hand and kind of rule the galaxy. And he's like, she's like, oh man, you're back on this, what again, kind of thing. And then he gets really mad. He's like, you're still holding on, let go. But he says, you have no place in the story. You come from nothing, you're nothing, but not to me. Join me. This is a really bad attempt, right? This is like the worst pickup line that you probably could have. And I think I really think it just boils down to, it's not Ben Solo. It is Kylo Ren again. Mm-hmm. And he is probably drunk on the power that he's just gone through, right? Yeah. Right. One, he's killed his master. I mean, that's a huge weight off his shoulder, especially given all the emotional turmoil that he's gone through and what that guy did to him. physically as well, right? He's now killed Snoke. He's taken out the guards. He's now the supreme leader, whether he realizes it or not. Maybe he does in that moment. But he's got everything he wants, and he's just witnessed how well Rey and he work together, and how much. I mean, he's just kind of like on the super high of, okay, yeah, this is it. And look how powerful we are. Join me, let's do this. And he's completely lost himself, right? He's no longer Ben Solo. There's no point of Ben Solo here at all. And I think Rey kind of sees right through that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's the whole but not to me thing too, where you can tell that he's trying, but it's not quite coming out the right way either. The Ben Solo is still trapped behind the Kylo Ren here. Yeah.
I mean, that's a good point. He is trying, like that whole, like he almost puts his foot in his mouth, like, hey, you're nothing, oh, but not to me.
Yeah, exactly.
No, a little late, buddy. You already said what you said, kind of thing. There's the elevator scene in the throne room, like that whole scene, right? Of the we're kind of going on reverse order here, but the whole scene of when they're in the elevator and they're looking at each other and they're talking and she's in the cuffs and all that. That's another one where I feel like, okay, that is Ben Solo.
Yeah, well, on the whole elevator scene, he's like staring straight ahead. He's not looking at her, and she's like talking to him, and then she says Ben, and then all of a sudden he snaps. He just goes directly to her and just looks straight into her eyes and just looks at her the whole rest of the scene. So it's just like there's something there that's pulling at him a little bit enough.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's one of the endearing things about her to him. And one of the things that I think is shocking, like no one talks to him this way.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, everybody lives in complete fear, or the opposite. Somebody like Snoke, who is just, constantly mentally abusing him.
Yeah. Degrading him always.
Yeah. And you got somebody like, Rey, who probably is speaking to him in the same way that Leia does. Mm-hmm. Right? No one connects to him. No one tries to connect with him in this way. No one is able to see him anything more than the monster that he is. And then you've got this one person here who, when she says Ben, he's like, what? Oh, yeah. Hey. So she's able to kind of break him out of that. And I think, you're right. In that moment, from that point on, it feels like that is Ben Solo talking to her. And they're, again, he's got some really skewed views of where things need to go and what's going to happen. And, she kind of throws that back in his face about, no, that you're going to turn, and I've seen it and that kind of thing. But, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of them connecting again. And then my favorite Reylo moment, if you will, it just goes right into that throne room scene, that throne room battle, because fantastic. I think to me that was, it's still one of my favorite, if not my favorite Star Wars action sequences of lightsaber fights.
No, it's wild. And this is kind of off topic too, but Daisy Ridley was talking about when they were filming that scene that the fire was real. So like the drapes and all the burning that was actually happening on set while they were filming. And oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine that. It was just such a feat in Star Wars, I think, for cinema wise. And I really liked it too. It was a really good scene. Good battle. Yeah,
I mean, you got to see, the battles. Like, I feel like all Star Wars lightsaber battles are just too short for me ever. Even I would say the one between Anakin and Kenobi felt too short too. But
not if you watch it on repeat.
Yeah, that's true. Or in slow-mo.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, like this, as quick as it was over, there was just everything about it was so good. The way it was choreographed, the way it was filmed, the cinematography, the lighting. I mean, it was all perfect for me in terms of a lightsaber battle.
I have to agree.
But underscoring all of that is the fact that it is a glimpse of just how well they worked together. Like they were feeding off each other, playing off each other. They obviously had never fought with one another, but this spoke to the dyad portion of it, right?
Yeah.
You've got these two people that are connected on a level that we can't comprehend, and they were able to kind of read each other's movements and then, be able to work with one another, which obviously would play out a little bit later in the Rise of Skywalker when, she obviously passes the lightsaber over to him, kind of thing. But anyways, a great Reylo moment.
Yes.
Let's get into the Rise of Skywalker moments. And I don't know. I won't say there was as many. I mean, obviously The Last Jedi has the best and the most potent Reylo moments, with the exception of the very final scene where they kiss. I don't think anything's going to put a bigger stamp on Reylo than that. But let's talk about where Rey heals Ben. We'll just jump there from at the beginning, because and there's two parts here, right? There's that moment where they're kind of fighting on the remnants of the Death Star, and she stabs him, she kills him, and she then goes to heal him. And I always took that moment as that's her. Well, like almost like Han says, right? Kylo Ren's dead.
Yeah,
that's who she killed.
Mm-hmm.
And who was left was a dying Ben Solo, and I think Rey recognized that. I think she understood that, and that's why she went to heal him. I don't think she did that out of the kindness of her heart because she had just killed somebody. I think it was truly, he's gone, and she recognized immediately that he was gone, and what was left was Ben Solo that was starting to bleed out, and that's why she went and healed him. And we get the moment, which I think is one of the best moments in there. She says, "I did want to take your hand, Ben's hand."
Mm-hmm.
That is a very sweet moment because I think and I love, as much as I've been critical about how these movies aren't connected and how they feel very displaced and disjoined in a lot of moments. That is one where I felt like, okay, yes, that is a great way to connect these two pieces.
Yeah.
Right. She did want to take your hand in The Last Jedi, the scene that we just talked about, not your hand, dude, Ben Solo's hand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it goes again to where she's differentiating, like, dude, you were being a jerk. Like, I would have taken Ben's hand. And kind of also going back to like the Rey heals Ben part, I almost felt it a little differently than what you did, where after she had, stabbed him, I feel like she was kind of taken aback that she had done it. Not so much that, she saw, a dying Ben Solo, but more of like, she didn't want to be that person, right? That was just killing willy-nilly almost. Even though she, was, obviously in the throne room battle sequence and taking out people like that. But I don't know. That's how I saw it when I watched it. She's like, oh, I made a mistake. And she went back and would heal. And obviously the whole Leia thing was happening. And she said, oh, Leia, before she went and healed him. So I feel like almost like her conscience was weighing on her too, especially with the whole sensing Leia or whatever. But
well, I can see that. I mean, and I think it'd be true to her character, right? I mean, if she is of the character that is equal light and equal dark, right? Then I can see where she would do something out of hate or anger,
like lashing out almost,
Yeah, and then completely come back and say, okay, now what's the counter to this?
Yeah.
Right. What's the inverse of it? And then that would be to bring life back. She took life away. She brings it back, kind of thing.
And really, too, even like not quite moving ahead here, but at the end when Ben heals Rey must not have used a significant portion of her life force to heal Ben. It must have been really insignificant just to keep him going there for a little bit longer.
Yeah, no, that I kind of felt that way too. Like his wound was mortal for sure, but he more than likely could have just, had no one been around, he likely would have just bled out at some point and died, right? Yeah. Whereas somebody like, and this is so funny because we were just watching the movie with the kids and they were asking me this very specific question about whether Rey was dead. It was my daughter actually, because she had never seen it.
Oh.
And I had to tell her, and she's only 5. And I had to tell her, yes, honey, Rey's dead right here.
Yeah.
And she just kept looking at me like, are you kidding me?
What?
And I'm like, no, no. And I told her, I said, no, honey, just watch, just wait. And so with the conversation we ended up having, and me, again, this is me trying to explain this to a 5-year-old, and she actually understood the concept. But what I explained to her was that she was dead. And in order to bring her back to life, Kylo Ren or Ben Solo had to use a lot of his life force to kind of bring her back to life. Yeah. And then I even alluded to the fact what had happened earlier with the battle with the snake, right? The snake was wounded, but Rey only expended a little bit amount of energy. Anyways, the long story short is she understood the concept, but I guess what I'm saying is I agree with you. She was dead at that point, and the only thing that was going to bring her back to life was him expending a tremendous amount of life force or midichlorians or whatever we're calling this, in order to bring her back from the dead or bring her back to the point that she was at. And that ultimately obviously sent him over the edge.
Yeah.
But and that's, that scene is still one of my favorites. I mean, I think I've said this, when we did the Q&A show just recently, one of my favorite moments in The Rise of Skywalker or my favorite moment in The Rise of Skywalker is the Han Solo and Ben Solo scene.
Yeah.
I think this is right up there with me though, in terms of for that movie. And this being the Ben healing racing.
Yeah.
Everything about that scene, and I've watched it so many times. And if you're a Reylo or you follow Reylo people, there are so many. This thing has been dissected down to the millisecond of and gestures of the hands and the arms and the lips and what they said and what they didn't say and all that's. I find all that stuff fascinating, which is why I follow these folks on Twitter. I just love how far they're able to kind of decompose this stuff and extract theories or speculation from them. But everything about that scene is really cool, just from how he's crawling to her and picks her up and he's holding there and when he sees that she's dead, he's almost got a panic attack, right? He's almost got a panic mode, like there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
And then it becomes very clear to him, like he watch his face. He kind of settles himself. He takes a breath, and then he starts the process of trying to bring her back to life, and knowing that he is very likely going to give up his own life in order to do that. But he doesn't hesitate, right? He doesn't think about it.
Yeah. And it's
just very consciously goes about it.
It's wild. It takes you all the way back to Anakin. And the whole reason he became what he became was because he was trying to save a loved one from dying. It's just the whole, how it brings everything together is just perfect in my eyes. Just how that works out.
So the Force bond itself, when we didn't talk about the kiss, I mean, I don't know if there's probably no more definitive moment, right? I talked about the hand touching was kind of like the moment when you realize it, that there's something there, but this was like the, stamp, if you will, like it's official. This is canon now. They are definitely romantically involved.
We've been vindicated.
Yeah. And I don't know how anybody can walk away from that kiss with anything other than any other reason, or I guess what's the word I'm using for, a conclusion that they're not romantically involved in some way or attracted to each other. You can, but I think you're wrong.
I've seen arguments against it, so
yeah, I have seen arguments against it too. So you had this question here about we had thought this was created by Snoke, this being the Force bond, and whether or not this was truthful. And I think now, no, I don't think it was. Yeah. Yeah. We'd always talked about that, and and I think Kylo Ren mentions it. How are you doing this? This would kill you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That kind of time at the moment in that time led us to believe that, okay, maybe that was Snoke and kind of bringing these two guys together. But yeah, I think all that's been squelched. I don't believe that at all for one instance anymore, that this was nothing, that this was anything less than these two being part of the dyad and being connected and being able to kind of do all of that together.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about the dyad before I think we're going to pretty much end here on this before we get into kind of final thoughts. But so you had mentioned whether or not these guys were soulmates, and I don't know what are your thoughts here? And we can talk about soulmates, and this is where I kind of want to bring in what I mentioned earlier, but is this the Force equivalent? Is this dyad the Force equivalent of what we would have as soulmates here in the real world? Well,
it feels like it. Only because, Kylo, when he was trying to talk to Rey about it, he's like, this only happens, he said last time this happened was like 1,000 years ago or something like that. And he makes it sound very special. And obviously we've not heard much of anything about a dyad before. So it has to be something special. And what's so special about a relationship? What can be more special than, they end up together, they kiss, or, they get married, or whatever happens, than soulmates. It's such a topic in all sorts of fiction, right? And obviously people discuss it about real life too, but especially in fiction. And that's why when the whole dyad thing was announced, when Kylo Ren started talking about it, that's kind of what popped into my head. I'm like, wow, like this is something cosmic. It's not just because they found each other, or it's something the Force connected them, but it's even more than that. It feels like so. Yeah,
it does feel bigger.
It does,
and this kind of goes back to. So I don't know if we'll post these. We probably won't post these, and there's no reason to. I think they've been taken down. I'm not sure anymore. But Rian Johnson back in 2016 had posted these pictures of red string, and there's a spool of like red sewing string as well. And this goes back to the red string theory. So those of you that are not familiar with this, it's an Asian cultural theory that there are people that are bound, to one another. It's called the red string of fate. So it's this concept that the belief that there are two people that are bound to be together, that they're destined to meet, right? And regardless of where they are in time or place or the circumstances, they will eventually come together. And there's this magical cord, right? This red string that connects them. And that connectedness, again, expands time and distance and the complications of the relationship, regardless of where they are, who they are, what they are, doesn't matter. Eventually, they are going to come together, and they have to come together. That's the theory behind this red string of fate. And Johnson had posted these pictures on his Twitter page back in 2016, and again, this kind of fueled the flames, right? I mean, it fanned the flames in terms of where people were going. And I think in his mind, without a shadow of doubt, they are soulmates. They are, whether we call that a dyad, which I don't think he was calling that at the time, but I think in his mind, at least from his perspective and how he wrote The Last Jedi, they definitely were soulmates, and that they were something bigger than just two people that ran across each other who just happened to be, descendants of two very powerful Force users who just happened to be Force users themselves, that kind of thing, right? I think that's kind of what we were saying here in terms of all this. And on that same topic, and I want to mention too, J.J. Abrams, if for those of you not aware, is set to direct a movie called Your Name, which is based on an anime that came out. Now, I am not the biggest anime fan, not because I don't like them. I just don't watch them, and I really don't have the time. But this one, when I read this, I was like, oh, well, let me go check this out, because this is interesting that he would pick this movie up as his next project, having come off The Rise of Skywalker. And now we talked about this before he came on the show. You have not seen it yet, right?
No, I have not.
Yeah. So the director is Makoto Shinkai, and it's about these two teenagers named Mitsuha and Taki, and they're high school teenagers, and they are bound by this red string of fate, and they're kind of having each other's dreams. And there's a lot of similarities and a lot of parallels that are people that are deriving from both The Rise of Skywalker, really the sequel trilogy, and the characters in this new anime. But I bring this up only because I really feel like even though Abrams isn't as explicit and he's not as in your face about it, I think he truly does believe that, at least from my perspective, I think he does believe that they are soulmates and they are bound to be together, and they were bound to be together. But again, I think he was trying to placate everybody and be all things to everybody without explicitly going in and saying it and putting it right in front of your face, and allowing people to kind of derive their own opinions and views about, just how much these guys are connected and how much they aren't connected.
Yeah.
So if you get a chance, take a look at that. And if you're in Discord, let me know what you think of the anime. I'm about halfway through it, and I've not had a chance to finish yet. All right, well, let's wrap this up. Let's put a bow on this here. So now that we know that Ben Solo lives, right? At least he disappeared, right?
Yeah.
So that would lead us to believe that he's a Force ghost somewhere, whether he's, I don't know how long, what level of Force ghost he's at just yet. But do you think there's any chance we're going to see Ben again?
Man, I hope so.
Yeah, I guess so. Me too.
If they just leave it, it's so bleak. It really is so bleak where it's at right now. There's been no relationships really that have worked in the Star Wars franchise really at all. You get so many characters where their loved ones die off, or even with like Leia and Han, where it kind of seemed happy at the time, but then, you come 30 years later or whatever, and they're, they've been fighting broken, and they've been separated, and there's just not really any happy endings when it comes to relationships in Star Wars. Like even the spin-offs, you've got like Beckett and Kira and Kanan Jarrus. Oh my gosh. Jin and Cassian. Like I could go on, just so many relationships that just don't end right or good anyways. But I really hope that there's something, whether it be, there's probably not going to be a TV show. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm with you. I don't, as much as I want to, again, I'm out there dropping hashtag Ben Solo deserves better and all that all day long. But at the end of the day, if I really, look at myself here, I just can't see it happening.
Yeah. I feel
as
like
bleak as like you said, as bleak as that sounds, I just don't know what's going to happen.
I feel like the best we could possibly get is maybe a book. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Even that would just, it's still, I'm grasping at strings here.
Well, I mean, we talked about this on the show last week, so I'm going to go off script and just kind of ask you your opinion on this on the fly. But one of the questions that had come up last week was whether or not we felt like when Ben healed Rey, did that somehow impregnate her?
I mean, there's been weirder things, right? I feel like
that's very true.
I feel like it's a possibility. I don't know if they do that just because I don't know, because you get Sheev, right, with the whole thing with Anakin, and that was a lot more sinister, right? But this happening, it would be accidental, right? So at least you'd think so. Ben's not like, hey, have my children, right?
Yeah, I don't think he was trying to do that right when it happened.
I don't think that's what was on his mind right then.
No.
But I've seen a lot of people talk about it, and you guys have talked about it a little bit. But I mean, if they do that, then cool. I think it'd be cool to hear that. But then, if that happened, please tell us more. Like, go on, write us a book, make a TV show, do something so we know what's happening.
So would you rather know what Rey went through or goes through being pregnant and having, Solo's baby in her? Or are you wanting something that takes place, let's say, at the age of 20, we're following this girl or this male or female or maybe twins, right? And then later on, we come to find out that this is actually the descendants of Rey. And we're then led to believe that, okay, well then that has to have been
right.
Solo.
I think that'd be easier for like the general audience to accept and like, kind of grasp onto. Me personally, I just love Rey. I feel so connected with her. I love her so much, and I would love to hear her story if that were the case. But I feel like if something like that were to happen, it would definitely be the child's story. Yeah,
and I think that would be, you're right. I think that's probably more palatable for people to take than coming right. And plus you don't have to worry about, okay, if it's anything other than a book, then you don't have to worry about, are we going to be able to get, Daisy Ridley back and what's that going to look like?
Like voice actors and all that stuff too, even. So
yeah. It allows you to have kind of a clean start and doing that.
Yeah, it does. So. Definitely.
Yeah. And, in terms of whether or not we see any more of Ben Solo or any more of Reylo, I don't think we will. I think if we do get it, you're right. It's maybe a book. Comics are probably still the safer way to go with this. Definitely not going to be a TV series. Definitely not going to be a movie or spin-off movie or of any sort.
And this is why fan fiction exists.
Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of stories. There's people out there that I'm friends with and mutuals with on Twitter that have completely rewritten The Rise of Skywalker.
I've seen those.
So, whatever you're looking for, trust me, it's out there. You will find it eventually.
You will find closure, even if it's not canon.
Yeah, even if it's not canon, yes. Someone has written your happy ending, trust me. And they're not bad. Some of them are pretty good.
They are, yeah.
All right. Well, so we'll kind of end the Reylo talk there. That was fun. It's kind of like the elephant in the room. It's been the elephant in the room on this show for a number of years. And I really wanted to just get out there and just kind of get my thoughts out there, and appreciate you jumping on to help with that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, let's talk about the network before we go. So a couple things. We are, Cantina Radio is going to be recorded. I didn't get a chance to record it because it was the Oregon Trail up in here for like the last 2 weeks. We're past all of that. Everybody's alive and healthy. So I'm going to record Cantina Radio. This is the Wrap Edition that I've been promising, and that'll come, and that'll be exclusive to Patreon members. So if you're a Patreon member, you will get that next week. We will not have a main show next week, and we'll come back the following week. So in 2 weeks, though, and I'm going to put this out there because I've already talked to him, and he said he'd do it, and I don't want to put him on the spot. And if it can't happen, then it's just because we couldn't get our schedules to line up, and we'll come back and do something in 2 weeks. But If you are a listener of Star Wars in Character, I have Chris from the show. He'll be coming on with me, and we were going to wrap up the Resistance animation. So we'll kind of talk about the last. I think we covered, Jonesy and I covered the first 6 episodes of season 2. And what I've asked Chris to do is come on the show. We'll talk about the last, I don't even know, what is it, 12 or however many episodes are left in season 2. And we'll kind of wrap and take a look at retrospective look on the series itself and some of the stuff that came about or maybe could play a part in future TV shows and that kind of thing. So again, Cantina Radio next week for Patreon members, no main show. And the following week, we'll come back with Chris Irons as our guest. As far as feedback goes, we did get a review. So this was a 5-star review. Thank you very much. This is coming from Mr. Train, who says, very insightful and makes the workday go by smooth. So I've heard the same thing about vodka and no, I'm kidding. I don't know if that's true or not. Right. And then we also got some really nice comments from somebody named Chris Williams. Chris, thank you. He says, I started listening to the podcast like 3 months ago. You guys are the best Star Wars podcast, hands down. I listen to you guys every day. I'm on episode 195. Please keep up the great work. So, Chris, thank you so much for posting that. That came via YouTube. So we don't have a lot of YouTube followers because we don't do a lot of YouTube videos, but there are people out there that have subscribed to the podcast and listened via YouTube. So if you're ever out there and want to drop comments, you're more than welcome to do that as well. All right. I think that's all I had. Any final thoughts on Reylo or life in general before we go?
Reylo is canon. That's all I need to say.
Reylo is canon, and it's a very big canon. So
yes.
You're welcome, Mike. And have fun editing 1 hour and
I'll get ready for all the banned messages on Discord.
Oh yeah, you're gonna be banned. He can't ban me, but he can.
That's right.
He may ban you.
He can try. He can try.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again, Makayla, for coming on the show.
Yes, thanks for having me again.
And we will see you guys here in about 2 weeks.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.